Welcome to Trinity Wesleyan Church Online. We are so glad to have you here today. We've been praying for you, and we're excited for what God is going to be speaking to you today. We are in our second week of the series Worthy, and we're talking about why Jesus is worthy and how we can worship him. So we're actually going to be using a book as our framework for this series. It's called Sacred Pathways. It's by a guy named Gary Thomas. And we all love and we connect to God in different ways. God created us with certain personalities and spiritual temperaments, which make us move toward certain or types of practices and prayers. God wants us to feel free to worship according to the way that he made us. A sacred pathway describes the way that we relate to God, how we draw near to him. And we can identify our sacred pathway and use practices which come naturally to what the pathway as an easier way of connecting to God. We don't necessarily have just one pathway. Most of us, however, will naturally have a certain predisposition for relating to God, which is our predominant spiritual temperament. So there's 9 spiritual pathways in this book. So we're going to go through one each week. So as we go through the series, I ask you to try each one. Maybe it will help you grow closer to God. Maybe it's going to help someone else grow closer to God. Or maybe you can teach someone else how to worship God through these different ways. You may identify with one of these pathways only, but you might identify with a lot of them or all of them. When we worship, we're shifting our perspective for God's perspective. Music is not the only way to worship God. It's how we interact it's how we interact throughout our life, and that's the evidence of how much we worship God throughout the week. So are we putting ourselves on top of the high places like we talked about last week? Are we putting ourselves on top of the high places and worshiping what we have or these idols? And are we tearing down the things we've put above God? One is going to make you anxious, and the other is going to give you peace. If you order your life correctly, you will have more peace. But if you don't order your life correctly, you're going to have less peace. And that's what we're really searching for, is more peace. So today we're going to be talking through the first sacred pathway. And it's the Naturalist. So we're going to talk about this, but check out this video before we keep talking about it.
In the beginning, God. Before there was God. The earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Then God spoke. At his command, light emerged from the darkness. The light he called day, and the darkness he called night. Then God separated the water from water, creating a vault he called sky. The waters under the sky were gathered to one place, and dry ground appeared. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. From the land arose vegetation, plants and trees, and every green thing bearing fruit, each according to their kinds. Then God placed lights in the vault of the sky to give light to earth, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also created the stars, calling them all out by name. The sun, moon, and stars shone brightly, reflecting the brilliance of the Lord. God filled the seas with every great creature with which the water teems, and God placed every winged bird in the sky above. Then God created the creatures of the land, livestock, wild animals, and all creatures that move along the ground, each according to its kind. God saw all that he had made, the heavens and the earth, the lights of the sky, the crop of the land, and every living thing beneath the waters and above. And it was good. But one thing was missing: God's most beloved creation. So God created man in his own image, raising him up from the dust of the earth. But it was not good for man to be alone. So God created woman from the flesh of man. He breathed his spirit into humanity, and together they reflected the image of God. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and rule it." God saw all that he had made, and it was very good.
The naturalist seeks to leave the formal architecture and the padded pews to enter an entirely new cathedral, a place that God himself has built. It's the great outdoors. I mean, any place that has some trees or a stream, or at minimum you just are able to look at the sky, it can be God's cathedral. Naturalists have found that getting outside can literally flood parched hearts and soften the hardest souls. Naturalists often learn their best lessons by being outdoors. And three particularly come to mind. They visualize scriptural truths, they start to see God more clearly, and they learn how to rest and relax. God has left evidence of his creativity all over nature throughout history. And we're not worshiping nature, but we are worshiping God by being in his creation. I mean, we live in concrete jungles. We have driveways and sidewalks and asphalt, and we have parking lots wherever you park, wherever you go to work. It's likely not wooded. It's likely doesn't have a lot of nature. We live in these concrete jungles and rush from meeting to meeting, but God's trying to speak to us still. So before we go forward, there's an important distinction about the naturalist pathway. The distinction is that we don't worship the creation, but we worship the Creator. We don't worship the creation, but we worship the Creator. Because if you worship the creation, you're making idols out of things. But when you are worshiping the Creator, you are able to use those things that God has created to bring us closer to him. Like the trees don't speak to us. God speaks to us. Animals won't give you a word from God. Your pet is not going to speak for God. And yeah, rarely there was that donkey that spoke in the New Testament. Yes, but God used a donkey. The donkey is not God. The evidence is what is left behind, and we use it as a way to worship the Creator. God has left us as evidence of his presence. Nature is God's creation. Nature is evidence of God. So God uses nature to teach Job about worship. So we're going to be talking through the story of Job, and we kind of talked about this last year, but I'm going to use the same scripture in a different way. So Job, just to summarize the chapters that are before this, because you don't want me to read 42 straight chapters, Satan wanted to come and test Job. He said that, Job only worships you, God, because you have given him all these things. He has wealth. He has a large family. He has a lot of livestock. He has a lot of property. He's saying it's very easy to worship when you have everything that you need. It's kind of like us in the United States. It's very easy to worship when you have it all. But really, it makes it more difficult because we are putting ourselves in charge, that we are providers. It puts us at the center of the story. It's all about me. It's about what I can do. It's about what I did, what I have the ability to do to sustain my own life. And Satan was saying it's difficult to worship when you don't have anything. So he wanted to take that away from Job. Satan was saying that it's difficult to worship when you don't have anything. But when you look at a lot of third world countries, when you look at persecuted churches, they actually worship better, and they're actually worshiping truly because God is the one that provides everything they have. So God allowed Satan to have these tests and do these tests on Job to make sure that he was actually following God, or if he was following his possessions. So God allowed this to happen, but he wouldn't let Satan hurt Job. He wouldn't let him take his life. So Job loses everything. Job lost every single thing he had. His family, he lost his servants, his livestock, his house. He and is in mourning. And his family and friends, before they got swept away in different things that happened, they would say, "Curse God and die." He said, "Curse God and die." His friends said this. His family said this. His own wife said, "Curse God and die." Job doesn't curse God, but he puts himself above God. It's what we do a lot. When it gets difficult, we complain. We're just like, why is this happening? Why are you letting this happen? This is frustrating. I thought you loved me. Why did you let this happen to me? So worship and blame are opposites. Worship and blame are opposites of each other. Worship is focusing on putting God first, and blaming is putting yourself first, saying, I don't know why you're letting this happen to me. I'm at the center of the universe. So Job is complaining to God, and his friend, Job's friend Elihu, pushes back, and he's saying, "Do you think this is right? You say, I am in the right, not God. God's the one that obviously messed this up. Yet you ask him, what profit is to me? And what do I gain by not sinning if I've lost everything?" Job just says, what's the point? I've lost everything. Why are you punishing me, God? It's a question that people ask a lot throughout history. Why does God let bad things happen to good people? Job's not sinning. Job's not cursing God and saying, "Curse God and die." But he's asking the question a lot of people have asked is, why does God let bad things happen to good people? It's been asked all throughout history. All throughout history. And God steps in at Job 38:4. You're just like, when dad gets off the couch, now you know you're in trouble. You're like, now you've done it, Job. Job, you went too far. So we're going to be in Job chapter 38, verse 4. And God says to Job, he says, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it?" The earth is 24,901 miles around. And God is asking him, do you remember putting those foundations together to make earth? Do you remember doing that? He goes on, verse 6, it says, on what were its footing set, or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy, who shut up the doors behind the doors when it burst forth from the womb? It says that there's 326 million trillion gallons of water. 326 million trillion gallons of water. That's 326 with 18 zeros, or 332.5 million cubic miles of water. That's a lot of water. Saying, who did all this? Verse 9, when I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness, when I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place, when I said, this far you may come and no further. Here's where your proud waves halt. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place, that it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. The wicked are denied their light, and their upraised arm is broken. Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea, or walked to the recesses of the deep? Have you been to those high places, Job? Do you remember forming those? Because I remember. I remember doing. The highest place on earth is Mount Everest. It's 29,032 feet above sea level. The lowest place on earth is 7 miles deep. The Mariana Trench is 36,201 feet below the water's surface. Which that was an interesting fact for me, that the deepest place on earth is basically larger than the tallest place on earth. And God is telling Job, do you remember like the deeps of the sea where nobody can see down there? It's 7 miles deep. Do you remember doing that? Verse 17, have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the deepest darkness? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. Tell me if you already know this, because I'm going to save my breath. He's basically saying, do you know where hell is located? In the universe that is 15 million light years across, or 300,000 times larger than our Milky Way galaxy? It would take 37,000 years to travel 1 light year. The universe that we can know about right now is 15 million light years across. Do you know where hell is located in all that? Verse 19, what is the way to the abode of light, and where does darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwelling? Surely you know, for you're already born, since you've lived all these years. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? A lightning bolt contains 300 million volts of electricity, or 30,000 amps. The typical current in a house is 120 volts, or 15 amps. Lightning comes down, and you're like, the power of God. There is so much power. Verse 25. Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain, and a path for the thunderstorm, to water a land where no one lives, an uninhabited desert, to satisfy a desolate wasteland and make it sprout with grass. Does the rain have a father? Do the fathers who fathers the drops of dew? From whose womb comes the ice? Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens, when the waters become hard as stone, when the surface of the deep is frozen? Can you bind the chains of Pleiades, or can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellations in their season, or lead out the bear with its cubs? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? Can you raise your voice to the clouds and cover yourself with a flood of water? Do you send the lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you, here we are? Who gives the ibis wisdom or gives the rooster understanding? Basically, with all these things, and then do you tell the rooster to crow, Job? In the morning when the dawn is happening, do you tell the rooster it just knows it's supposed to crow? Verse 37, who has wisdom to count the clouds? Who can tip over the water jars of the heavens when the dust becomes hard and the clods of earth stick together? Do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions when they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in a thicket? Who provides food for the raven when its young cry out to God and wander around for lack of food? Do you make sure every animal is fed? Job. Tell me where you hide that food. I'd like to know. If you think you know more than me, I'd like to know. Verse 39, do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? Do you count the months until they bear? Do you know the time they give birth? They crouch down and bring forth their young. Their labor pains are ended. Their young thrive and they grow strong in the wild. Their young thrive and grow strong in the wild. They leave and do not return. Job, I forgot you knew all these things. I forgot you were in charge of making living things breathe. Tell me how you do this. Verse 5 says, who let the wild donkey go free? Who untied its ropes? I gave it the wasteland as its home, the salt flats as its habitat. It laughs at the commotion in the town. It does not hear about a driver's shout. Saying the donkey is so loud. And it doesn't care what's going on in town. It doesn't care what the driver is telling it what to do. It's just carefree. It's loud. It's having fun. Verse 8, it ranges the hills for its pastures and searches for any green thing. Will the wild ox consent to serve you? Will it stay by your manger at night? Can you hold it to the furrow with a harness? Will it till the valleys behind you? Will you rely on it for its great strength? Will you leave your heavy work to it? Can you trust it to haul in your grain and bring it to your threshing floor? Job, aren't you glad that I created the ox for you to make life a little bit easier for you? Aren't you glad that I made this for you? It says, the wings of the ostrich flap joyfully, though they cannot compare with the wings and feathers of the stork. She lays her eggs on the ground and lets them warm in the sand, unmindful that a foot may crush them, that some wild animal may trample them. She treats her young harshly as if they were not hers. She cares not that her labor was in vain, for God did not endow her with wisdom or give her a good share of sense. The ostrich has the brain the size of a small chicken's egg. Its eyes are bigger than its brain. Its eyes are about the size of a pool ball. And its brain is smaller than its eyes. And God says, yet when she spreads her feathers to run, she laughs at horse and rider. The average ostrich can run 43 miles an hour. The average horse can run about 27 miles per hour. Yeah, it's a dumb bird. But watch when it runs. It runs so fast. I love that bird. I enjoy watching it. Verse 19, do you give the horse its strength or clothe its neck with a flowing mane? Do you make it leap like a locust, striking terror with its proud snorting? It paws fiercely rejoicing in its strength, and charges into the fray. It laughs at fear, afraid of nothing. It does not shy away from the sword. The quiver rattles up against the side, along with the flashing spear and lance. In frenzied excitement, it eats up the ground. It cannot stand still when the trumpet sounds. At the blast of the trumpet, it snorts, "Aha!" It catches the scent of battle from afar. The shout of the commanders and the battle cry. It's ready to go into war. This horse is fearless. It runs toward danger. It doesn't shy away from it. 26. Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom and spread its wings toward the south? Does the eagle soar at your command and build its nest on high? It dwells on a cliff and stays there at night. A rocky crag is its stronghold. From there it looks for food. It detects it from afar. Its young ones feast on blood, and where the slain are, there it is. The average eagle can detect and see prey from 2 miles away. Isn't that amazing? Chapter 40. The Lord said to Job, "Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him." Remember, Job was basically saying, God, I'm in the right. You've messed up. And God went through this whole speech about all these things that he made. Like, do you remember when these are made? Because I do. I don't think you remember. I don't think you've put yourself into the place. I don't think you remember how much I can do. Then Job answered the Lord. He said, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I'll say no more. We go back to last week. God is worthy of our praise because he has value. He has merit. I mean, who else could create an amazing world and a universe with all of its creatures, with all of the formations, with all of the DNA, all of the things that make it work perfectly? God is worthy of our praise because he has prominence. He's elevated. He's distinguished. And just look at the sheer amount of creation. Who or what could do that? Only God could do that. God is worthy of our praise because he is sufficient. He's safe. He provides everything that we need. Without our habitat being perfect, humanity could not have survived. Elementary statistical theory shows that the probability of 200 successive mutations being successful is 1 chance out of 10 to the 60th power. 10 to the 60th power. If that was written out, it would be 1 followed by 60 zeros. 1 by 60 zeros. Basically, in other words, the chance of a 200 component organism could be formed by mutation and natural selection is less than 1 chance out of a trillion. Does anybody think that a 200-part system is unreasonably complex? It should be noted that a one-celled plant or animal may have millions of molecular parts that work together. That would be a very simple DNA structure. And that's the possibility of it happening by chance. Even though God deserves our praise, it will never be enough. It will never measure up to what he deserves. That we are unworthy. And there's only one person who is worthy. And that being in nature, we can start to worship God through the evidence that he's left us. As we end today, the takeaways you can take is that there is no one like our God. The second is nature is evidence to God's power. And the third is worship the Creator, not the creation. So your homework for today, your homework for this week is I just want you to try one of these things. Take 30 minutes this week and just go sit in nature. You could go to Kit's Hummock and go take a lawn chair and sit on the beach and let the waves crash in. Maybe kick over a few horseshoe crabs. Or you could go to Silver Lake and watch people fish, or just listen to the water rush down. As you're there, find some interesting nature to observe and pick it up and look at it and look how close it is. Look at the intricate structure of even a rock or a leaf or grass. Take a close look at it and then back up and look at it with all of everything around it. If you're looking at a lawn, you're just like, man, this little thing is all those, this little blade of grass makes this lawn, or this little leaf is part of this tree, which is part of this forest. And find some creatures to observe, maybe a squirrel or a rabbit, or watch the birds fly over. Just observe them and just look at the intricate structure of them. You look at the sky and imagine the expanse of the universe. Look at the universe. See how big it is. And try to figure out just, wow, it just keeps going. So then as you're observing, pray and thank God for his creation. That he's the one who sustains us. That he's the one who created all this. Then also take time and thank God that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. That you're fearfully and wonderfully made, that your body breathes on its own, that it does what it's supposed to do, that your blood is pumping, your heart is moving things as it should, that God created us in his image, and he said it is good. We can worship God through the evidence that he has left behind of his presence, that he created us, that there is an intelligent design in all of this that we live in.